I wasn't really planning on weighing in on all of the Loblaws and grocery store drama that's been blowing up in Canada recently, but with the company taking to Twitter to try to directly convince Canadians that it's not the problem and Loblaws isn't involved in the problem, well, I figured I'd fill you in on the whole situation. You might remember about mid-October of 2022, Loblaws came out and said, hey, we're going to freeze prices on all no-name products until the end of January 2023. Here's a little video in case you don't remember.
I know food prices are top of mind these days. They just keep going up. Your grocery bill is higher because it costs manufacturers way more to produce products than it has in decades. That's clearly no comfort when you're worried about your own food bill. So, to help hit the brakes on food inflation, we're freezing the price of all no-name products until January 31st. That's 1,500 essentials locked. Food prices go up, no-name prices won't. Guaranteed. We know that every cent counts.
Some people kind of bought into this and said, oh, look at No Frills, they're doing a good thing here by freezing no-name products, but other people found a number of other reasons to actually be frustrated about this no-name price freeze. People were pointing out that this was only being applied to no-name products while Loblaw Companies Limited, the holding company for a number of other companies, holds a bunch of different companies. All of these stores are owned by Loblaw, and this price freeze is only applied to no-name products, which is a very specific private label brand that is sort of sold in a lot of the grocery store brands listed in this company list. And we're not even getting into the drama that just happened a couple of days ago, but at this point in time, people were saying, well, that's great, Galen, you froze no-name prices, but you own a whole whack of other brands. Why didn't you freeze the prices there if you really wanted to help Canadians? Brands like Joe Fresh, the clothing brand that's sold at real Canadian superstores. And while this isn't exactly related, you might remember the absolutely awful tragedy related to Joe Fresh, where over 1,000 people died in one of its factories in Bangladesh back in 2013, after which many people said, hey, we're going to boycott all of these Loblaws brands. And they even got slapped with a $2 billion class action lawsuit, which ended up actually getting dismissed back in 2019. So with all of this controversy, you can see why folks are starting to not really trust this brand, but there's another reason that people were frustrated about this price freeze, even just to begin with, before we get into what's just happened. The Metro competitor, their grocery store competitor, the CEO of Metro came out and said that actually holiday price holds are actually an industry standard. This is normal across a whole bunch of different grocery store competitors. We all sort of pause our prices over the holiday season. So when Galen Weston comes out and says, hey, we're doing a big no-name price freeze, we're helping you, you should be thankful for us, we're pausing prices. Well, that's actually something that they probably would have done otherwise, and they were just sort of using this as a PR push. And it seems like this is all really just blown up in their face, because while they could have just done this price freeze quietly like they perhaps have done in the past, and like some competitors may have similarly done if we're to believe what the Metro CEO is saying, now they've got all this attention on them because they've announced this price freeze. And so now that we're past January 31st and this price freeze has ended, well, there's a ton of attention on Loblaws at the very same time that people are saying that grocery prices are set to increase again now that this freeze is over. So people's general opinion towards this brand has already taken a huge hit, and now it's blown up in their face even more. And this is where things get really freaking wacky, because it seems like they've taken to Twitter to individually start commenting on anybody's tweets that even so much as mention the price freeze. So Loblaw's official account on Twitter starts going into the replies of random Twitter users, not even just big political figures or anything like this, but random people on Twitter sort of defending themselves against any sort of criticism with the ending of this price freeze. And we can see one here. Wow, thanks Loblaws, a whole price freeze for less than a season. Very useful. And Loblaws, the company itself, their PR department decided it was a good idea to reply with, we froze prices to help consumers at any time they needed it, or at a time they needed it most. And we did something to fight inflation. It meant something for Canadians. This one says Loblaws took a dry January on price gouging so they could go on an absolute bender of price gouging in February, to which Loblaws, the official Twitter account, replied, we took a stand on the price freeze because we knew that the price of food was a huge concern for many Canadians. We're not done cutting grocery bills. This year, the average family will save thousands of dollars this year if they pick no name over other brands. Another tongue-in-cheek tweet here, Loblaws price freeze ends today to be replaced by the new price thaw. And Loblaws, again, the official company, says food inflation continues and we're seeing a lot of big cost increases from vendors, but hundreds of no-name products will not go up. And this sort of last one that's an example here, Loblaws is replying to a number of different people. We may be the face of food inflation, but we are not the cause. The staggering increase of costs throughout the food supply chain end up on our shelves, leading to higher food prices. More excuses saying that our profits aren't the reason for food inflation. Our margins are flat. It's the suppliers' costs that continue to climb, pushing prices higher. It's not our fault. They go on to say that on a $100 grocery bill, they make less than $4 of profit. So clearly they're saying, hey, look at all these reasons, Canadians, we are not the problem. They say while we may be the face of food inflation, we are certainly not the cause. Food prices are higher in our stores simply because the manufacturers who make the products are charging more for them, to which this Twitter user replied, whoever thought of and whoever approved this canned response, oof, and also the slogan, Loblaws, we're the face of food inflation, is quite the catchy slogan. And it just blows my mind that they try to communicate with Canadians through their mentions on Twitter. I don't get why they'd use this as a strategy. They make the very same claims that they've been making for months and months and months now, that it's not their fault prices are going up and their profit margins haven't increased, and it's their suppliers' prices that are increasing and it's their fault. But if Canadians haven't been satisfied by those responses over the past 6 months, what makes you think that getting into their DMs, replying to them one-on-one with the exact same messaging is going to convince them otherwise? They do admit, however, that they are making more money as a company than they did in years past, but they emphasize that they're not making more money on groceries. This is what they're saying. Instead, claiming that the Loblaw company that owns all of the stores we previously mentioned, well, they're only earning more because people are buying much more high-ticket, high-margin items at its other stores, not its grocery stores, stores like Shoppers Drug Mart or like the Real Canadian Superstore where people can buy TVs and things like this. They're saying that the higher margin purchases there are the only reason that Loblaws is making more as a company overall. The problem is they're not really even showing numbers that prove this is the case. They're just saying this and then Canadians are having to trust them. Here I've actually brought up their Q3 report to shareholders. Publicly traded companies, like companies that have stocks on the stock market in Canada, have to put forward these quarterly earnings reports that show all of the details of how much money they're making, how much costs they have, and all kinds of different numbers that are important for shareholders to know about. And this chart from their most recent earnings report shows their gross profit for two different periods, 40 weeks leading up to October 2022 and 40 weeks leading up to October 2021. So comparing 40 weeks from 2021 to the most recent 40 weeks in 2022. And you can sort of see the difference here. Last year, they made $12,682,000,000, whereas the same period, but this year, they made $13,556,000,000. That's a 7% increase, or approximately $874 million more dollars made in this period compared to last. So we can tell they're making more money, but the problem is they're not actually required to show where they're making that money from, which individual stores, which individual brands. They can just show, yes, we are making more money, but they don't have to sort of cut that up into the different sections and different categories of their business on where they're making money and where those profit margins are sitting. That's how politicians like Jagmeet Singh, who has been one of the most vocal politicians on this issue, can say that profits are way up for these types of companies, while the companies themselves can point to their numbers and say, actually, we're not making more money on groceries, and they can both simultaneously claim that they're right because the grocery store companies don't have to show the data as to how much money they're making specifically off of their grocery business. But regardless, it doesn't change the situation and the sentiment that most Canadians are feeling towards this brand. If prices are up and people can afford less, and that anger is going to be directed somewhere. And it just absolutely blows my mind, the strategy that they're trying to use here, going to people in their Twitter DMs trying to convince them of the fact that they're not making more money on groceries, when they could have a very simple solution. I mean, they're not obligated to provide this level of detail about their individual businesses, but if this is true, that they're only making $4 off of a $100 grocery visit, then why not share those numbers, share that data with Canadians? If they're so worried about their public image that they would go into individual people's Twitter replies and try to convince them of this, why not just show the evidence and show the proof to Canadians? It seems like a relatively simple solution, but they haven't done it up to this point, and currently they're actually having inquiries into this in the House of Commons and in individual political committees, so we might get more information if these politicians request it, but I'm not holding my breath. So anyways, that's about it. That's where the situation's at. Let me know what you think about it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I hope this video helped you out at least a little bit. See you next time.